Ice dropped his mag and slammed in another. I think that man he only had half a spare mag left and popped only his hand up to lay down some suppressive fire. I popped just my AR up and tried to guess whereabouts they were and lay down some suppressive fire of my own. I winced as incoming bullets started shredding the windows, but at least they weren't hitting us. With us returning fire, though, they soon took cover and the bullets stopped. I reached out and was able to reach an AK. I popped the mag out and it fell full. Racked the slide a few times, seen fine. Rocked the mag in, reached over and racked the bolt, cycled fine. Made sure it was unsafe and slid it over to eyes. I did a pointer finger with my hand and tilted it to the side to show him where the safety was located. He gave me the OK sign and slid my pistol back to me. I wasn't expecting that, but I didn't mind. I holstered it and then I started cranking off rounds of 7.62x39 at the 100-footer. 9mm isn't really that loud, and neither is 5.56, as long as you're the one behind the rifle and not to the sides. But my head starts ringing once we get up to 7.62x39. Eyes was apparently liking this a lot, though, and didn't mind. I started unholstering all the AK mags I could find and sliding them over to Eyes, and he was having an absolute riot. This, of course, wasn't going to defeat the pirates, but they sure weren't going to be able to board with him doing that. I hunted around for AR mags and started loading my rig. I popped up just in time to see some riflemen starting to try to line up on Eyes and laid suppressive fire down for him. I got one of them and almost got another one before he took cover. This was perfect timing, which I assumed the pirates had planned for. Eyes needed to swap out mags, and the AK mags were about the size of the 9mm mags he'd been using. He dropped down and tried to figure out the new mags. I grabbed a mag and did a little rocking motion for him so he would understand it. And then he remembered watching me pull my bolt back all the time to chamber a new round, and he did that. Then we were ready to rock again. He'd been down for a few seconds and had been hearing the pirate boats idling. They weren't very far out from the sounds of it. I popped my rifle up and tried to shoot in their direction, and Eyes did the same. I didn't like it, though. I tried to get Eyes' attention, but he couldn't hear me. I threw something at him because I didn't want him to pop his head up. I suddenly imagined a firing squad on the other end. He looked at me like, "What?" Seems like he was having a good time. I motioned him that we need to grab everything and get back to the kitchen, that this phase was over. He protested, but I was adamant. I didn't like this at all. I put my AR on safe and grabbed everything I could and started shuffling back while Eyes covered me. Him watching me retreat, though, I think made him realize that he'd gotten a little overzealous. He popped his rifle up and took some more shots anyway. Partially to say we'll be back, but partially I think to hold their attention for as long as possible. We both scooted inside and hoped they didn't see the door open. Chapter 20. Survived the third encounter. Mid-morning, day 2. I shoved as much glass as I could out of the way so we could get into the safety of the kitchen in case they decided to just perforate the entire area. Eyes came in soon after, locking the door behind him. "Why did we retreat? We almost had them," Eyes asked. I responded, "That part of the op was done, which was an ambush. We weren't meant to fight them off at that spot forever. We need to fall back now that that op was successful and figure out what our next plan is." Eyes responded, "Yeah, I know, you're right. What are our options?" I answered, "Well, they're going to have a difficult time docking now. I had us pull back because they're running out of options. The less options they have, the more desperate they'll get, which gets progressively worse for us. They know we have more firepower now, and they're at about 50% manpower. They only really have 2 8-footers left in their fleet, and you really tore up their 100-footer apart with that AK." He grinned. "I love this thing." "Yes, those are very cool. By the way, don't forget to put it on safe." "Oh yeah, thanks," Eyes responded, then flicked the paddle on his AK. "Oh, congrats on the new AK, by the way. Sorry about the sling. We'll get you a new one." I trailed off as if I hadn't fully thought that through. It was just a saying that I like to say. Eyes responded back, "Don't worry about it, man. You've been amazing." We sat and thought. The jet skis had all rallied back around the 8-footers and the 100-footer, and they apparently are going over the final battle plan. I assumed it was whether or not to just ram us or burn us down or some combination of the two, because, you can't just leave us alone. I had assumed they wanted this as their new capital ship or a floating home base. At the very least, they wanted all the loot on it, but I wasn't sure that we had frustrated them so bad at this point that they were done. I'm sure that's what they're deciding right at this very moment. I was all out of tricks, honestly, because I didn't know what they were going to do. They didn't know what they were going to do. I had a feeling at this point they were going to have people with rifles pointed at all 3 levels ready to shoot anything that moved. I was positive that the second either one of us got a shot off, that the remaining pirates would have us completely dialed in. That's why they were sitting in range like that. They knew there was nothing we could do about it now. I motioned to Eyes, and he nodded back. I pointed down to the hole. He nodded. I shut my red dot off and closed the lens caps. We grabbed everything and then shuffled back down to the hole. We can talk easier down here, and we don't have to worry about getting mowed down at all, I said also, to get some more thoughts out, and I continued. Also, I figured you'd like to get back on your cameras, since we were pretty blind up there just going by hearing. We can't shoot from down here, but we couldn't safely shoot up from there anymore either. Eyes nodded and went back to munching his cereal from earlier. I grabbed my cup and started munching on mine as we watched the cameras. He offered to top mine off, and I gladly accepted. Then he topped his cup of cereal off and got us both water bottles. We watched the cameras, and sure enough, they had riflemen pointed right at where we were. I walked up and snapped a picture with my camera phone and scrolled back to make sure it saved, and it had. It was a very surreal picture, not one I would soon forget. The cat came and started sniffing all of our gear, no doubt downloading all the new information into the cat's database of whatever. We both got a good chuckle out of that. As Eyes kept watching the pirates, making sure they weren't moving, I started rummaging through the equipment. Thankfully, I hadn't had cut many straps off the chest rigs. I laid them all out on the table and asked Eyes which ones he wanted. I'd been able to say 4. He looked at them all and pointed at one right away. I think this was also the one the cat preferred, which was pretty funny. I took the damaged straps off of it and started swapping out the good straps from the other ones. Soon I had a repaired rig and started putting AK mags into it. I put them upside down so they wouldn't get rain in them, since it rained in our wonderful state 9 months out of the year. I laid the empties and the half-fulls aside and filled the chest rig with as many full-ish mags as I could find for Eyes. It was easy to tell the AK mags apart. They were shaped more like a banana, or as we joked, the old state of California. Now California Free State, or whatever they called themselves. They were so band-happy you couldn't even own these there unless you were part of the Cool Kid Club. But yes, these magazines looked like the outline of California. Also, instead of being copper, the casings were usually generally made out of steel. That ammo would eventually shred up an AR or something fierce, but AKs were just fine with steel casings. You didn't really reload steel casings, but this made them amazingly inexpensive to shoot. This made AKs and steel-cased ammo super popular before the collapse. Well, in between the country trying to ban the import, of course. Which meant there was still tons of the ammo post-collapse. So anyway, as I was thinking about that, I was parsing out the old steel banana-shaped, California-shaped mags with the steel-cased ammo into a pile. I had Eyes' new chest rig about half full or half empty, depending on which side of the barrel you were going to be on. I took a damaged strap of similar size and fabric and went to Eyes' new AK and did a couple of really strong and tight square knots, which I always had a saying for. Right over left and left over right. If you did them right, they ended up looking like a square. They were good when you had 2 pieces of rope that needed to go together that were equal sizes and strengths. I tied one side of the strap to one side of the damaged strap and the other side of the damaged strap to the other loose end. It gave some extra length to the sling, but not much, since much of the harness went into the making of the knots. The way the knots worked, The more they got pulled on, the stronger they got, so I added a lot of sling into the knot.